She didn't see the kick coming until his designer shoe connected with her ribs, sending her sprawling across the wet Seoul pavement in front of 100 witnesses who pulled out their phones instead of helping. He stood over her, this man she'd once loved, sneering down at her dark skin like it disgusted him, not knowing the cold eyes watching from the black Mercedes across the street belonged to a man who just decided her ex-boyfriend had exactly 24 hours left to live. Kang Min-ho's hand tightened on the door handle, something primal and utterly devastating awakening in his chest as he watched the beautiful woman struggle to her feet with a dignity that shouldn't exist after such humiliation. Welcome to Unfold Korean Stories, besties. Please like, share and subscribe. The rain had started as a drizzle that morning, but by the time Naomi Williams left her tiny studio apartment in Itaewon, it was a downpour. She clutched her broken umbrella, her curvy figure wrapped in a coat that had seen better days, her natural curls plastered to her brown skin as she hurried toward the bus stop. She was late for her shift at the hotel, and her manager had already warned her about tardiness. She didn't notice the expensive car idling at the corner, or the man inside watching her with an intensity that would have made her run. Min-ho had been on his way to a meeting when he'd spotted her, this woman whose photograph had been on his desk for 3 days, ever since his intelligence team identified her as a potential witness to a crime his organization needed to bury. He'd planned to send someone to intimidate her into silence. Standard procedure. Nothing personal. But then she'd smiled at a street vendor despite the rain, buying a small flower with money she clearly couldn't afford, and something in Min-ho's carefully constructed world had shifted. The meeting was forgotten. Min-ho told his driver to follow her. That's when he saw him. Kang Dae-young, a mid-level executive at a company Min-ho's organization had ties with. And the way Dae-young looked at Naomi made Min-ho's blood run cold. "Please, Dae-young," Naomi was saying, her voice barely audible over the rain. "I just need what you owe me. 3 months of rent money. You promised." Dae-young's handsome face twisted with disgust. "I don't owe you anything, you lying bitch. You think I'd actually date someone like you? I was doing charity work." The crowd that had been hurrying past in the rain began to slow, sensing drama. "You lived in my apartment," Naomi said, her voice shaking but firm. "You used my money, my food, my everything for 6 months. The least you can do is..." The kick came fast and brutal, his expensive shoe catching her in the ribs. Naomi went down hard on the wet pavement, her cry of pain lost in the gasps of the crowd. "That's what you get for embarrassing me in public," Dae-young snarled, looming over her. "Black whore, thinking she deserves a Korean man. Go back to whatever shithole country you came from." Inside the Mercedes, Min-ho's vision went red. His second-in-command, Park Jin-woo, had seen his boss angry before, had seen him order executions without blinking, had watched him break men with his bare hands. But this was different. This was barely controlled rage of a man who'd just seen something he'd decided was his being damaged. "Boss," Jin-woo started carefully. "We don't know her. This isn't our business. Find out everything about Kang Dae-young," Min-ho said, his voice deadly calm as he watched Naomi struggle to her feet, one hand pressed to her side, tears mixing with rain on her face. "I want to know where he lives, where he works, who he loves, who he fears. I want his entire life mapped out by tonight." "And the woman?" Min-ho's eyes never left Naomi as she limped away from the laughing crowd, her dignity somehow intact despite the humiliation. "Her too. Everything. But carefully. She doesn't know we exist yet." By the time Naomi reached the hotel, her ribs were screaming with every breath. She'd wrapped them as best she could in the staff bathroom, then plastered on a smile and started her shift, checking in guests and answering phones like her world wasn't crumbling. She'd been in Seoul for 2 years, teaching English and trying to make a life. Dae-young had seemed kind at first, romantic even, until he'd moved into her place and shown his true colors. By the time she'd gathered the courage to kick him out, he'd drained her savings and left her with debts she couldn't pay. "Miss Williams." Her manager's sharp voice cut through her thoughts. "VIP guest in the penthouse suite. He's requested you specifically for his evening service." Naomi's stomach dropped. VIP guests meant entitled men who thought foreign women were exotic playthings. "Can someone else?" He asked for you by name. Don't make me repeat myself. Later that evening, Naomi stood outside the penthouse suite, her hands trembling as she knocked. The door opened to reveal a man who stole her breath. He was tall, powerfully built, wearing a black suit that probably cost more than her yearly salary. His face was devastating. Sharp jawline, intense dark eyes, black hair styled with casual perfection. But it was the way he looked at her that made her pulse race. Like he'd been waiting for her. Like she was something precious he'd finally found. "Miss Williams," he said. His English perfect but accented. "Please come in." Min-ho had spent the afternoon learning everything about Naomi Williams. 26 years old, born in Chicago, moved to Seoul after college with dreams of experiencing Asia. Worked 2 jobs to support herself. Sent money home to her sick mother every month. Had dated Kang Dae-young for 8 months before he'd shown his true nature. And today, Dae-young had kicked her in front of a crowd and called her a whore. Min-ho had already made his decision. Dae-young would pay. But first, he needed to see her up close, needed to understand why the sight of her pain had made him want to burn the city down. Now she stood in his suite. Her uniform crisp despite the bruises he knew were hidden underneath, her dark eyes wary but professional. "I didn't request any services," Naomi said carefully, staying near the door. "If there's been a mistake." "No mistake," Min-ho said, gesturing to the sitting area. "Please sit. I have a proposition for you." Every instinct told Naomi to run, but something about his voice, the controlled power in his movements, made her stay. She sat on the edge of the sofa, keeping her distance. Min-ho poured 2 glasses of water, set one in front of her, then sat across from her, deliberately far enough that she wouldn't feel trapped. "I saw what happened today. In the rain." Naomi's face flushed with humiliation. "I don't know what. Kang Dae-young kicked you. In front of witnesses. Then he insulted you." Min-ho's voice was calm, but his eyes were fire. "And you walked away with your head high." Tears burned in Naomi's eyes. "Why are you bringing this up? If you're here to..." "I'm here to offer you a solution," Min-ho interrupted. "You need money. You need security. You need revenge." He leaned forward slightly. "I can give you all 3. "Who are you?" Naomi whispered. "Someone who doesn't like seeing beautiful things destroyed," Min-ho said quietly. "And someone who has the power to make Kang Dae-young regret ever touching you." The next morning, Naomi woke in her own apartment, having fled the penthouse suite without agreeing to anything. The mysterious man had scared her, not with threats, but with the intensity in his eyes when he'd said the word beautiful. Like he meant it. Like he'd measured her worth and found her priceless. But when she opened her door to leave for work, she found a black box on her doorstep. Inside was a new phone, expensive and sleek, with a single number programmed in. The attached note read, "When you're ready to stop running, call me." "Mitch at work," whispers followed her. Apparently, someone had leaked security footage of her conversation with the penthouse VIP. The other staff eyed her with jealousy and speculation. "Did he proposition you?" one of the other clerks asked with a smirk. "Rich men love exotic types." Naomi ignored her, but the words stung. She'd spent 2 years in Korea being fetishized, othered, made to feel like her dark skin was either a novelty or a flaw. Dae-young had played into that, making her feel lucky that he'd chosen her, when really he'd been using her. That evening, she found out exactly who her mysterious benefactor was. A news alert on her phone showed Kang Dae-young's face. He'd been arrested for embezzlement, tax evasion, and assault. Security footage from that morning's incident, perfectly clear despite the rain, had been sent to every major news outlet. His company had fired him. His fiancée, the one Naomi hadn't known about, had dumped him publicly. And at the bottom of the article was a quote from an anonymous source who'd provided the evidence. "Some people think they can hurt others without consequence. They're wrong." Naomi pulled out the phone with shaking hands and dialed the only number saved. He answered on the first ring. "Naomi." Just her name, but the way he said it made her shiver. "You did this," she whispered. "You destroyed him." "He destroyed himself," Min-ho corrected. I just made sure everyone knew about it. Are you upset? You should be. This level of revenge was terrifying, spoke to power and connection she couldn't fathom. But all she felt was relief, and a terrifying gratitude. No, she admitted. I'm not upset. Good. His voice softened. Have dinner with me. Let me explain everything properly. I don't even know your name. Kang Min-ho. And I promise after tonight, you'll know everything. The restaurant was private, exclusive, the kind of place where world leaders dined in secret. Min-ho was waiting when Naomi arrived, and the way his eyes traveled over her dress, simple and modest but hugging her curves, made heat flood her face. You're beautiful, he said without preamble, pulling out her chair. I should have said that first before anything else. Naomi sat, her heart racing. Mr. Kang, Min-ho. Please. Min-ho then. She took a breath. Who are you really? He didn't lie. Didn't sugarcoat it. He told her about his family's organization, the legitimate businesses and the less legitimate ones. Told her about his power, his reputation, the fear his name inspired. I'm not a good man, he finished. I've done things that would horrify you. But I've never hurt someone who didn't deserve it, and I've never taken something that wasn't freely given. Then what do you want from me? Naomi asked. Though she was afraid of the answer, Min-ho's eyes held hers. I want you to let me protect you. I want you to accept my help getting back on your feet. And selfishly. His voice dropped. I want the right to see you, to know you're safe, to make sure no one ever hurts you again. Why? The question burst out. You don't know me. I'm nobody. You're wrong. Min-ho reached across the table, not touching her but close. The moment I saw you stand up after being kicked, saw you walk away with your head high despite everything, I knew you were someone extraordinary. Someone worth protecting. Naomi's throat tightened. People don't just decide things like that. I do, he said simply. I've built my life on trusting my instincts. And every instinct I have is telling me that you're important. That I need to keep you safe. His jaw tightened. That I can't let you go. The intensity in his voice should have scared her. Instead, it made her feel something she hadn't felt in years. Valued. Over the next few weeks, Min-ho proved his words through actions. Naomi's debt disappeared overnight, paid off by an anonymous donor. Her apartment lease was bought out and she was moved to a secure building with actual heat and hot water. When she protested, Min-ho simply said, You can't help your mother if you're struggling to survive. He knew about her mother. Knew everything. It should have felt invasive, but instead it felt like someone finally saw her whole life and didn't find her wanting. They had dinner 3 times a week. Min-ho never pushed for more, never made demands, but his eyes told a different story. The way he watched her eat, laugh, talk about her day. It was possessive and tender all at once. You're staring, Naomi said one evening, catching his gaze. I know. No apology, just honesty. I like watching you be happy. Jin-woo, watching from the security detail table, shook his head. His boss had fallen and fallen hard. The great Kang Min-ho, feared by every criminal organization in Seoul, was completely undone by a curvy American woman with kind eyes and a steel spine. It would be romantic if it wasn't also dangerous. The threat came on a Wednesday. Naomi was leaving her new building when a car pulled up. Not Min-ho's Mercedes, but something older, dented. 3 men got out, and she recognized one from Dae-young's social media. Friends of his, probably. Men who thought like him. You ruined his life, bitch. The leader snarled in broken English. Time to pay. Naomi backed toward the building entrance. But they were faster. The leader grabbed her arm, and Naomi's training kicked in. The self-defense classes Min-ho had insisted she take. She kicked hard, connecting with his knee. He went down swearing. But there were 3 of them, and she was alone. Then she wasn't. Min-ho appeared like a storm, his men flanking him. The violence was quick and brutal. Min-ho's fists connecting with faces, bones breaking, men falling. When it was over, the 3 attackers were on the ground, groaning, and Min-ho was turning to Naomi with wild eyes. Did they hurt you? His hands ran over her arms, checking for injuries. His touch gentle despite the blood on his knuckles. Tell me. I'm okay. Naomi managed, shaking. Min-ho, I'm okay. He pulled her against his chest, his heart hammering beneath her cheek. They're gone now. No one will hurt you again. I swear it. That night, Min-ho insisted she stay at his penthouse. Just until he was sure there were no more threats, he'd said. Naomi had agreed, too shaken to argue. The penthouse was massive, modern and sleek, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul. Min-ho showed her to the guest room, but when he turned to leave, Naomi caught his wrist. Stay, she whispered. Please. I don't want to be alone. Something flared in his eyes. Heat and tenderness and barely restrained want. Naomi, if I stay. I know. She stepped closer, close enough to feel his warmth. I'm not asking you to be noble. I'm asking you to stay. His control shattered. Min-ho cupped her face, his thumbs brushing her cheeks as he searched her eyes. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. He kissed her then, and it was nothing like she'd expected. He was gentle despite his power, reverent despite his hunger, kissing her like she was precious, like she was everything. Tell me if you want me to stop, he murmured against her lips. Don't stop, Naomi breathed, and he didn't. Fade to black. Naomi woke alone, the bed beside her was cold, and panic seized her chest. Had he left? Had last night meant nothing? Had she been stupid enough to trust another man who... You're awake. She turned to find Min-ho in the doorway, fully dressed in a suit, his hair perfect. He looked untouchable, the powerful crime boss again, and Naomi's heart sank. I have meetings, he said, his voice neutral. Jin-woo will drive you home. There's breakfast in the kitchen. He was gone before she could respond, and Naomi felt tears burn her eyes. Of course this had been a mistake. She'd given herself to a man who collected beautiful things and got bored once he'd claimed them. She dressed quickly, ignoring breakfast, and slipped out before Jin-woo could stop her. By the afternoon, she'd blocked Min-ho's number and moved to a friend's apartment across the city. If he wanted to forget her, she'd make it easy. What Naomi didn't know was that Min-ho had left that morning not because he was done with her, but because staying would have meant canceling a meeting about a threat to his organization. A threat that, if not handled immediately, could have endangered everyone he protected, including her. He'd planned to return before she woke, to bring her breakfast in bed, to tell her that last night had changed everything for him. Instead, he returned to an empty penthouse and a blocked number. Find her, he told Jin-woo, his voice cracking. Now. Boss, maybe she wants space. She thinks I used her. Min-ho's fist slammed into the wall. She thinks I'm like him. Like that bastard who kicked her. Find her. I need to fix this. It took 3 days. 3 days of Min-ho tearing the city apart, calling in every favor, leveraging every connection. 3 days of Naomi crying in her friend's apartment, trying to convince herself she'd made the right choice by walking away. On the 4th day, he found her at her old job, covering a shift for a sick colleague. Min-ho walked into the hotel lobby like he owned it. He did, she'd find out later. And the moment Naomi saw him, her breath caught. He looked devastated, exhausted, like he hadn't slept since she'd left. We need to talk, he said, and his voice held none of his usual command. It was a plea. There's nothing to talk about, Naomi said, but her voice shook. You got what you wanted. I want everything, Min-ho interrupted, stepping closer. I want your mornings and your evenings and every moment in between. I want the right to hold you when you're sad and celebrate with you when you're happy. I want to protect you, cherish you, worship you. His hand reached for hers. I left that morning because I had to handle a threat to my organization. I was going to come back before you woke, was going to bring you breakfast and tell you that you've become the most important thing in my world. Tears spilled down Naomi's cheeks. How am I supposed to believe that? Because I'm here, in front of everyone, telling you. Min-ho's voice broke. Because I haven't slept or eaten or breathed properly since you left. Because the thought of you thinking I used you is killing me. He pulled out a small box, and Naomi's heart stopped. "Because I'm asking you to marry me." The lobby went silent. "That's insane," Naomi whispered. "We barely know each other. I know you're brave and kind and stronger than anyone I've ever met. I know you make me want to be better. I know that life without you isn't life at all." Min-ho opened the box, revealing a ring that probably cost more than a house. "Marry me, Naomi. Let me spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of you." "You're crazy," she said, but she was smiling through tears. "Crazy about you," he agreed. "Is that a yes?" Naomi thought about her life before him. The loneliness, the struggle, the man who'd literally kicked her in the street. Then she thought about Min-ho's fierce protection, his gentle hands, the way he looked at her like she was his entire world. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Min-ho slid the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms and kissed her in front of a lobby full of shocked guests. When he finally released her, he kept his forehead pressed to hers, his breath ragged. "You're mine now," he murmured. "Forever." "Possessive much?" Naomi teased, but her voice was thick with emotion. "Completely." His eyes burned into hers. "And I'm yours. Every broken, dangerous piece of me belongs to you." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Min-ho moved Naomi into his penthouse officially, though she insisted on keeping her job at the hotel. He'd tried to argue, but she'd been firm. "I need my own identity," she'd said. "I need to be more than just your fiancé." He'd understood, though his security detail now followed her everywhere, much to her annoyance. The engagement announcement sent shockwaves through Seoul's elite circles. Kang Min-ho, the untouchable crime lord, was marrying a foreign woman of no status or connection. The gossip was vicious, the speculation cruel. Gold digger. He'll get bored once the novelty wears off. Probably pregnant, trapping him. Naomi heard the whispers at work, saw the side eyes from other women at the few social events Min-ho insisted she attend. It hurt, but she'd learned to hold her head high. "Let them talk," Min-ho said one evening, finding her upset after a particularly cruel comment at a charity gala. "Their opinions mean nothing." "They think I'm using you," Naomi said quietly. "And I know the truth, that I'm the one using you desperately to remember what it feels like to be human." He tilted her chin up. "You saved me, Naomi. Not the other way around." Their first real fight came a month before the wedding. Naomi had been at work when a woman appeared at the hotel desk, beautiful, Korean, dripping with designer labels. She'd smiled at Naomi with cold calculation. "You must be the American," she'd said in perfect English. "I'm Lee Soo-jin, Min-ho's ex-fiancé." Naomi's stomach had dropped. He never mentioned. Of course not. Men like him don't talk about their pasts. Soo-jin had leaned closer. "Did he tell you why we ended?" "Because I wanted children and he's infertile. Medical condition from a childhood illness." "Tragic, really." The words had hit like bullets. Naomi had stammered something polite and Soo-jin had left, her mission accomplished. That evening, Naomi confronted Min-ho. "Were you ever going to tell me you can't have children?" she asked, her voice shaking. Min-ho went very still. "She came to see you. Answer the question." He exhaled slowly. "Yes, I was going to tell you. After the wedding, once you were legally protected by my name. I didn't want to scare you away." "Scare me away?" Naomi's voice rose. "You think I'm that shallow?" "I think you deserve the choice," Min-ho said quietly. "I think every woman wants children eventually, and I can't give you that. I thought if you were already my wife, already committed, you might." He stopped, jaw tight. "I was being selfish." Naomi's anger deflated. "Min-ho, I don't care about children. I care about honesty. I should have told you sooner." He reached for her hands. "I'm sorry. There are no more secrets, I promise." They'd made up that night, but the encounter with Soo-jin had rattled Naomi. If one ex could appear so easily, what other ghosts haunted Min-ho's past? She got her answer a week later when Soo-jin's brother, Lee Dong-hyun, made his move. Dong-hyun ran a rival organization, one that had been at odds with Min-ho's family for years. The engagement had been an attempt at peace, one that had failed when Min-ho had called it off. Now Dong-hyun saw an opportunity for revenge. Naomi was leaving work late when the van pulled up. This time, there were 6 men, professionals, and they had her gagged and bound before she could scream. She woke in a warehouse, zip-tied to a chair, Dong-hyun standing before her with a smile that promised pain. "Nothing personal," he said in accented English. "But your leverage. Min-ho will give me everything I want to get you back. And if he doesn't," he shrugged, "then I'll send you back in pieces until he learns his lesson." Terror clawed at Naomi's throat, but she forced herself to stay calm. Min-ho would come. She knew he would come. She just had to survive until he did. At the penthouse, Min-ho was in a meeting when Jin-woo burst in, face pale. "She's gone." Taken from the hotel parking lot. Security footage shows Lee's men. Min-ho's world stopped, then restarted in a wave of pure, murderous rage. "Mobilize everyone," he said, his voice deadly calm. "I want every property Lee owns raided. I want every man he employs questioned. I want his entire organization torn apart until we find her. Boss, if we move this aggressively, it's war." "Then it's war," Min-ho snarled. "No one touches what's mine and lives." He made a phone call, one he'd hoped never to make. Within an hour, every major crime family in Seoul had been contacted, the old codes invoked. Lee Dong-hyun had crossed a line, taken another man's promised bride. In their world that meant death. The warehouse raid happened at dawn. Min-ho led the charge himself, his men flowing in like a deadly tide. The gunfire was brief but brutal. Lee's guards fell, and then Min-ho was there, kicking open the room where Naomi was being held. She was alive, bruised, terrified but alive. "Naomi," he breathed, crossing to her in 2 strides and cutting her restraints. "Are you hurt?" "Did they?" "I'm okay," she managed, then threw her arms around his neck. "I knew you'd come." Min-ho held her so tight she could barely breathe, his face buried in her hair. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. This is my fault. My world, my enemies." "Stop." Naomi pulled back to look at him. "I chose this world when I chose you. I'm not leaving." Behind them, Jin-woo cleared his throat. "Boss, Lee is in custody. What do you want done?" Min-ho's eyes went cold. "Make it slow. Make it hurt. And make sure everyone knows what happens when you touch my family." The aftermath was brutal. Lee Dong-hyun's organization was dismantled, his assets seized, his name erased from Seoul's underworld. The man himself disappeared, and no one asked questions. Some lessons needed to be permanent. But the ordeal had shaken Naomi more than she'd admitted. She started having nightmares, jumping at shadows, unable to shake the memory of being helpless. Min-ho noticed immediately. Course he did. "We're leaving Seoul," he announced one evening. "For a while. Until you feel safe again." "You can't just leave," Naomi protested. "Your organization can run without me for a few months. You're more important." His tone left no room for argument. "I'm taking you somewhere private, somewhere you can breathe again." They flew to Jeju Island, to a private estate Min-ho owned on the coast. It was beautiful, peaceful, and far from the violence of Seoul. For 2 months they existed in a bubble, just them, the ocean, and the slow process of Naomi healing. Min-ho barely worked, spending his days making her laugh, his nights holding her through the nightmares. "You're good at this," Naomi said one afternoon as they walked the beach. "Taking care of me. It's the easiest thing I've ever done," Min-ho replied, lacing his fingers through hers. "Loving you is easy. Everything else is just noise." On their last night in Jeju, as they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Min-ho pulled her close. "Marry me tomorrow," he said suddenly. "Not the big wedding we planned. Just us on this beach, with the ocean as our witness. Naomi's breath caught. Min-ho. I don't want to wait anymore. I don't want to risk another day where you're not completely, legally, unbreakably mine. His eyes were fierce. Say yes. She didn't hesitate. Yes. They were married at dawn, with only Jin-woo and the estate staff as witnesses. Naomi wore a simple white dress, flowers in her hair. Min-ho wore a suit but no tie. His usual control undone by joy. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Min-ho kissed her like it was the first and last time, like she was air and he'd been drowning. My wife, he murmured against her lips. Mine forever. Yours forever, she agreed. Their wedding night was gentle, reverent, Min-ho worshipping her body like she was sacred. He took his time mapping every curve, every soft place, whispering how much he loved her, how beautiful she was, how he'd never let her go. Fade to black. They returned to Seoul as husband and wife, ready to face whatever came next together. What came next was unexpected. 3 months after the wedding, Naomi started feeling exhausted, nauseous. At first she thought it was stress, but when it continued, Min-ho insisted she see a doctor. The diagnosis shocked them both. Pregnant, Naomi repeated, staring at the doctor in disbelief. But Min-ho is. Sometimes medical diagnoses are wrong, the doctor said gently. Especially old ones. Your husband's childhood illness may not have had the lasting effects initially believed. In the car ride home, Naomi and Min-ho sat in stunned silence. We're having a baby, Naomi finally said, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. We're having a baby, Min-ho repeated, his voice cracking. Then he pulled the car over, right there on the busy Seoul street, and pulled his wife into his arms. We're having a baby. He was crying, Naomi realized. This powerful, dangerous man was crying tears of joy. His face buried in her neck, his hands shaking as they cradled her stomach. I never thought I'd have this, he whispered. A family. Someone to love who loves me back. Now I have everything. You have everything, Naomi agreed, her own tears flowing freely. We have everything. The pregnancy was difficult. Naomi had terrible morning sickness, and Min-ho hovered like an anxious shadow, driving her crazy with his overprotectiveness. I can still work, she protested when he tried to make her quit the hotel. No. Min-ho, I'm pregnant, not dying. You're carrying my child. You need rest. I need you to trust me to know my own limits, she interrupted firmly. He'd relented, but the security detail had tripled, and Jin-woo personally escorted her to and from work daily. When Naomi's mother flew in from Chicago to visit, she took one look at her daughter's glowing face and Min-ho's besotted expression and laughed. You two are disgustingly happy, she said, but her voice was thick with emotion. Baby girl, you found yourself a good man. The best man, Naomi corrected, watching Min-ho carry her mother's luggage like she was royalty. He better be, after everything you've been through. The nursery was painted a soft yellow, neutral since they'd decided to wait to find out the baby's sex. Min-ho had insisted on the best of everything. The safest crib, the softest blankets, monitors that tracked every breath and heartbeat. You're going to be an overprotective father, Naomi teased, watching him assemble furniture with an intensity usually reserved for business deals. Damn right I am, Min-ho agreed. No one touches my family. Not ever again. 7 months into the pregnancy, Naomi went into early labor. It was sudden, terrifying, and Min-ho's carefully maintained control shattered completely. Stay with me, he begged, holding her hand as doctors rushed around them. Please, Naomi, stay with me. I'm not going anywhere, she promised, though the pain was excruciating. We're both staying. 12 hours later, their son was born, small but healthy, with his mother's dark skin and his father's intense eyes. They named him Taeo, meaning greatness in Korean. Min-ho held his son for the first time with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face. He's perfect. You're both perfect. We made him, Naomi said tiredly from the hospital bed. We made something beautiful. The most beautiful thing in the world, Min-ho agreed, pressing a kiss to Taeo's forehead. Then he carefully handed their son to the nurse and moved to Naomi's side, taking her hand. Thank you. For him, for you, for giving me a reason to be better than what I was. You've always been better than you thought, Naomi whispered. You just needed someone to show you. The first months of parenthood were chaos. Taeo had his father's stubborn streak and his mother's strong will, which meant sleepless nights and exhausted days. But watching Min-ho, this feared crime lord, pace the nursery at 3 a.m, singing soft lullabies in Korean to their crying son, made Naomi fall in love with him all over again. You're a natural, she said one night, finding him asleep in the rocking chair with Taeo on his chest, both of them breathing in sync. Min-ho had slowly transformed his life after Taeo's birth. The more dangerous aspects of his organization were delegated to trusted lieutenants. He pulled back from anything that might bring violence near his family. Jin-woo had joked that fatherhood had domesticated the great Kang Min-ho, but the truth was simpler. He'd finally found something worth being afraid of losing. When Taeo was 6 months old, an unexpected visitor arrived at the penthouse. Lee Soo-jin stood in the lobby, older, humbler, her designer labels replaced with simple clothes. The security team had called Min-ho immediately, but he'd allowed her up, curious about her purpose. I'm not here to cause trouble, Soo-jin said quickly when Naomi opened the door, Taeo in her arms. I came to apologize. Naomi studied her for a long moment, then stepped aside. Come in. Min-ho appeared from his office, his expression carefully neutral. Soo-jin. Min-ho. She bowed slightly, a gesture of respect he hadn't expected. I came to say I'm sorry. For my brother's actions, for my own cruelty when I visited your wife at her work. I was jealous and bitter, and I tried to hurt what you'd built out of spite. Your brother paid for his crimes, Min-ho said coldly. I know. And I've spent the last year in therapy, trying to understand why I became so toxic. Soo-jin's eyes moved to Naomi, then to the baby. I heard about your son. Congratulations. Genuinely. Thank you, Naomi said carefully. I also came to tell you something Min-ho should know. Soo-jin took a breath. My brother had partners. Other families who resented your marriage, who saw Naomi as a weakness they could exploit. Most backed off after what happened to Dong-hyun, but there's one who hasn't. Park Chong-min. He's been quietly building a case against your organization, working with prosecutors who want to bring you down. Min-ho's expression darkened. Why tell me this? Because regardless of our past, you deserve to protect your family. And because maybe doing one good thing will help me sleep better at night. Soo-jin moved toward the door. Watch your back, Min-ho. And take care of her. She's stronger than I ever was. After she left, Naomi turned to her husband. Do you believe her? Jin-woo will verify the information, but yes, I think she was telling the truth. Min-ho pulled Naomi and Taeo close. Which means we need to be more careful. Park Chong-min is ambitious and vindictive. If he's working with prosecutors, this could get complicated. The threat materialized faster than expected. 2 weeks later, Min-ho was served with a subpoena. The prosecutor's office was building a case for racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy. Park Chong-min had provided evidence, carefully curated, impossible to fully disprove, damaging enough to put Min-ho away for decades. They're going after our assets too, Min-ho's lawyer explained during an emergency meeting. The penthouse, the businesses, everything. If they succeed in freezing your accounts, your family will have nothing. Naomi felt ice flood her veins. They could lose everything. Worse, Taeo could lose his father. There has to be a way to fight this, she said. There is, Min-ho said quietly. I can make a deal. Provide information on other organizations in exchange for immunity. But that would make me a target. Every crime family in Seoul would want me dead. Then we fight it legitimately, Naomi insisted. You've been moving the business toward legal operations anyway. We show them you're reforming, that you're a father now, that you're not the man they think you are. Min-ho's lawyer shook his head. The evidence is strong. Even if half of it is fabricated by Park, the other half is real. Min-ho's past isn't something we can simply explain away. That night, lying in bed with Teo sleeping in his crib nearby, Naomi made a decision. I'm going to talk to Park Chong-min, she announced. Min-ho sat up. Absolutely not. Someone needs to make him understand what he's really doing. He's not just going after a criminal. He's trying to destroy a family. A baby's father. Naomi, men like Park don't care about families. They care about power and revenge. Then let me appeal to his humanity. What's the worst that can happen? He says no. She met her husband's eyes. I have to try, Min-ho. For Teo. I won't let our son grow up without his father. After hours of argument, Min-ho reluctantly agreed, but only with Jin Woo and a full security team present. Park Chong-min agreed to meet at a neutral location, a cafe in downtown Seoul. He was younger than Naomi expected, perhaps early 40s, with sharp eyes and an expensive suit. The kind of man who'd built his empire on being smarter and more ruthless than his competitors. Mrs. Kong, he greeted her coolly. This is unexpected. Mr. Park. Naomi sat across from him, keeping her voice steady. I came to ask you to reconsider the case against my husband. Why would I do that? Because you're not just prosecuting a criminal. You're trying to destroy a family. My son is 6 months old. He needs his father. Park's expression didn't change. Your husband made choices that brought him to this point. I'm simply ensuring justice is served. Is this really about justice? Or is this about proving you're powerful enough to take down Kang Min-ho? Naomi leaned forward. I know about your history with my husband. The business deals that went south, the territories you competed over. This is personal for you. And if it is... Park's eyes narrowed. Your husband has broken more laws than I can count. He deserves everything coming to him. Maybe he does, Naomi admitted. But has he broken any laws recently? Since our son was born? He's been reforming his operations, going legitimate. Doesn't that count for something? People don't change, Mrs. Kong. You're wrong. Naomi's voice strengthened. Min-ho changed the moment he met me. Changed more when Teo was born. He's not the same man you're trying to prosecute. Give him a chance to prove it. Park studied her for a long moment. What exactly are you proposing? Let Min-ho divest from the illegal operations completely. Full transparency, full cooperation with oversight. In exchange, you drop the criminal charges. He'll plead to lesser charges, pay whatever fines are necessary, but he stays with his family. And why would I agree to this? I have him dead to rights. Because deep down, you're not the kind of man who destroys families for revenge. Because showing mercy makes you more powerful than any prosecution ever could. And because, Naomi played her final card, if you put Min-ho in prison, you create a power vacuum. Every organization he's been keeping in check will go to war over his territory. The violence will be catastrophic. But if he's out, cooperating, maintaining stability while transitioning to legitimate business, Seoul stays peaceful. Park was silent for a long time. Then, surprisingly, he laughed. You're good. I can see why Min-ho fell for you. Is that a yes? It's a maybe. I'll need to verify that Min-ho is actually willing to cooperate fully. No half measures, no hidden assets, complete transparency. He will be, Naomi promised. If it means staying with his family, he'll do anything. The deal took months to finalize. Min-ho had to testify about certain operations, had to divest from several businesses, had to pay substantial fines. But in the end he avoided prison. The charges were reduced to financial crimes with suspended sentences, contingent on continued cooperation and clean operations. Park Chong-min, surprisingly, became an unlikely ally. He'd been impressed by Naomi's courage in coming to him, and more impressed by Min-ho's willingness to actually follow through on the deal. Within a year, he'd moved on from trying to destroy the Kang family to focusing on actual violent criminals. "Your wife saved you," he told Min-ho at their final meeting. "Remember that." "I remember it every day," Min-ho replied quietly. Life gradually found a new normal. Min-ho's businesses were now completely legitimate. Real estate, technology investments, import-export operations that didn't involve anything questionable. It was less exciting, he admitted, but watching Teo take his first steps was more thrilling than any criminal enterprise had ever been. When Teo was 2 years old, Naomi became pregnant again. This time with twins, a boy and a girl. Min-ho had actually fainted when the ultrasound tech announced it, much to everyone's amusement. 3 children, he'd said wonderingly after he'd recovered. "We're going to have 3 children. We're going to need a bigger place," Naomi had replied, laughing at his dazed expression. They moved to a house in a gated community, still in Seoul but quieter, safer, with a yard where children could play. Min-ho had initially resisted leaving the penthouse, but one look at Teo running through the garden had changed his mind. "This is home," he'd said, watching his son chase butterflies. "This is everything I never knew I wanted." The twins, Min-jae and Hannah, arrived healthy and loud. Teo was fascinated by his new siblings, constantly wanting to help feed them, hold them, show them his toys. "You're going to be a wonderful big brother," Naomi told him as he gently patted Hannah's head. "Protect them," Teo announced seriously, his father's protective nature already showing. "Like Appa protects us." Min-ho, overhearing this, had to leave the room to compose himself. Years passed in a blur of birthday parties, school events, and family dinners. Naomi had eventually left the hotel job to focus on the children, though she'd started a non-profit helping foreign women in Korea navigate cultural challenges and find community. It was fulfilling work, using her own experiences to help others. Min-ho's reputation had transformed from feared crime lord to respected businessman and family man. People who'd once crossed the street to avoid him now waved at parks while he pushed his children on swings. Jin Woo, promoted to CEO of Min-ho's legitimate businesses, joked that his boss had gone soft. "Not soft," Min-ho had corrected, watching Naomi laugh with their children in the sunshine. "Just finally found what's worth being soft for." On their 10th anniversary, Min-ho took Naomi back to Jeju Island, to the estate where they'd gotten married. Jin Woo stayed with the children, much to his good-natured grumbling. 10 years, Naomi said, standing on the same beach where they'd exchanged vows. "Can you believe it? Best 10 years of my life," Min-ho replied, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Even the hard parts were worth it because I got to face them with you. We've come so far from that rainy street in Seoul. You've come so far. I just followed you toward the light." He turned her to face him. "I was lost before you, Naomi. Angry, violent, empty. You gave me purpose. Gave me a reason to be better. You gave yourself the chance to be better," she corrected. "I just loved you while you figured it out." "I'm still figuring it out," he admitted. "Every day I wake up wondering how I got lucky enough to have you, to have our children, to have this life. You got lucky because you decided to protect a woman being kicked in the street instead of looking away. You got lucky because you have a good heart, even when you tried to hide it." Naomi cupped his face. "And I got lucky because the man who saved me turned out to be the love of my life." They renewed their vows that evening, with only the ocean as their witness again, just like the first time. But this time there were no emergencies to run from, no enemies to hide from, just 2 people who'd fought for their happiness and won. "I love you," Min-ho said, sliding a new ring onto her finger, a band etched with their children's birth dates. "Every version of you I've known, every version still to come." "I love you," Naomi replied, tears streaming down her face. "My protector, my partner, my home." They returned to Seoul and their beautiful chaos of family life. Teo was now 10, serious and protective of his younger siblings, already showing signs of inheriting his father's sharp business mind. The twins were 7, Min-jae with his father's intensity and Hannah with her mother's warm spirit. One evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Min-ho helping Hannah with her homework while Naomi refereed an argument between the boys. He looked around at his family and felt something settle in his chest. Complete, overwhelming peace. "What are you smiling about?" Naomi asked, catching his expression. "Just thinking about how different my life could have been. If I hadn't seen you that day, if I hadn't decided you were worth protecting, if I hadn't fallen completely in love with you before I even knew your name." "Fate," Teo announced matter-of-factly. "Teacher said some people are meant to find each other." "Smart teacher," Min-ho agreed, meeting Naomi's eyes across the table. "Some people are definitely meant to find each other." Later that night, after the children were in bed, Min-ho and Naomi stood in their bedroom, looking out at the Seoul skyline. The city that had witnessed their beginning, their struggles, their triumph. "No regrets?" Min-ho asked quietly, pulling her close. "Not a single one," Naomi replied. "Every hard moment, every scary decision, every tear, they all led here. To this life with you, with our children. I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. Even the part where I was a criminal. Especially that part. Because it means I got to watch you transform into the man you were always meant to be." Min-ho kissed the top of her head, breathing in her familiar scent. "I was thinking about that day in the rain. When Ding kicked you. Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't been watching?" "Sometimes," Naomi admitted. "But I try not to dwell on alternate timelines. In this timeline you were there. You saw me. You decided I was worth protecting. And that changed everything. You were always worth protecting. I just recognized it faster than most." He turned her to face him. "Promise me something. Anything. Promise me we'll never stop fighting for this. For us, for our family. That no matter what challenges come, we face them together." "I promise," Naomi said solemnly. "Together always." "Together always," he echoed. 15 years after that rainy day in Seoul, Naomi Williams, now Kang Naomi, stood in her beautiful home, surrounded by the family she and Min-ho had built, and knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. Some love stories start with rain and end in sunshine. Theirs had started with rain and violence, and a stranger's decision to protect someone he didn't know. But it had become something more beautiful than either of them could have imagined. A partnership built on trust, a family built on love, and a life built on choosing each other every single day. Min-ho found her standing there, lost in thought, and wrapped his arms around her. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured. "Happy endings," Naomi replied. "And how ours is still being written. What's the next chapter?" She turned in his arms, smiling up at the man who'd changed her life. "Whatever we decide it is. That's the beautiful part. We get to write it together. Then let's make it extraordinary," Min-ho said, and kissed her as the Seoul lights twinkled in the distance, bearing witness to a love that had transformed them both, a love that would last a lifetime. Because some people are meant to find each other. And when they do, when they fight for each other despite every obstacle, when they choose love over fear and family over everything else, that's when the real story begins. Their story. A story of redemption, protection, and a love fierce enough to weather any storm. Thank you for reading this Unfold Korean Stories romance. If you enjoyed this tale of unexpected love, dangerous protection, and family triumph, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories that will make your heart race and your soul soar.